You're sitting alone at 2 a.m., phone in hand, scrolling through their Instagram. Your chest feels like it's caving in. You've watched their stories 3 times. You've checked if they've viewed yours. You've drafted and deleted 17 messages. And here's what no one tells you. This pain you're feeling right now, it's not the breakup destroying you. It's what you're doing after it. There are specific behaviors you're repeating, toxic patterns you've normalized, decisions you're making in the dark that are amplifying your suffering tenfold. And in the next 4,000 words, I'm going to dissect exactly what those are. Because, unlike most advice you'll hear, we're not going soft here. We're going to talk like adults who understand that weakness disguises itself as normalcy. Number 1, the illusion of control. Listen to me. When Thomas Shelby lost something valuable, he didn't spiral into chaos. He didn't check every corner of Birmingham repeatedly hoping it would reappear. He sat down. He thought. He created a plan. But here's what you're doing, and this is where everything falls apart. You're checking. You're checking their social media. You're checking if they've moved on. You're checking if they're with someone else. You're checking if they're posting pictures of themselves happy. You're checking their location. You're checking their stories. You're checking if they viewed yours. You're telling yourself you're not checking, but you are. You're doing it obsessively, multiple times a day, sometimes multiple times an hour. And here's the psychological trap you've fallen into. You believe that by checking, you maintain some form of control over the situation. You think that if you stay informed about their life, about their movements, about their emotional state, you're somehow protecting yourself. You're not. You're doing the exact opposite. Every time you check, your brain releases a small hit of dopamine, not because the news is good, but because you got information. Your nervous system craves certainty in an uncertain situation, and the checking provides it temporarily. It feels like you're doing something. It feels productive. It feels like you're not helpless, but you are helpless, and that's the point you need to accept. Thomas Shelby understood something fundamental about power. Real power isn't about constant surveillance. It's about knowing when to stop looking. It's about trusting your past decisions enough to move forward without verification. When he made a move, he didn't second guess it. He didn't check obsessively to see if the other person was suffering equally. He moved on. And that's where your power lies. The checking is stealing your future. Every single time you look at their profile, you're not gathering information that helps you. You're gathering information that feeds your obsession. You're creating a narrative in your head. If they're happy, you suffer because they don't seem affected. If they're sad, you suffer because you're responsible. If they're silent, you suffer because you're imagining the worst. There is no outcome where checking makes you feel better. There's no version of this where you scroll through their life and think, great, I feel so much better now. But you keep doing it anyway. And you know why? Because stopping it feels like abandonment. It feels like you're giving up. And admitting that means facing the actual pain instead of the distracted pain you're in right now. Here's what most breakup advice gets wrong. They tell you to stop checking and fill that time with hobbies. They tell you to stay busy. They tell you to focus on yourself. And it's not wrong, but it's incomplete. Because you're not addicted to checking just because you're bored. You're addicted to it because it's a mechanism to delay grief. Grief is the thing you're running from, not the breakup itself. The breakup is over. It happened, it's done, but grief is still here, and it's enormous, and it requires your full attention. And checking their Instagram is a beautiful escape from that, because it lets you pretend you're still connected. It lets you pretend they might come back. It lets you pretend the story isn't finished yet. Thomas Shelby knew the difference between a strategy and a delusion. He looked at his enemies directly, calculated the cost, and then acted. He didn't obsess over their next move. He predicted it, planned for it, and stayed ahead. He didn't need to keep watching them because he'd already thought 10 steps ahead. And here's what you need to understand. The checking is not strategic. It's not planning. It's panic disguised as prudence. It's anxiety dressed up as caution. It's obsession wearing the mask of care. So here's what you're going to do. You're going to unfollow them. Not because you hate them. Not because you want to hurt them or send them a message. But because you respect yourself enough to know that looking at their life is not information gathering, it's self-harm. It's taking a knife to a wound that needs time to close. And every time you check, you're opening it again. You're resetting the healing clock. You're telling your brain that you can't move on because they might do something that changes everything. And they might, and it won't matter, because they're not your responsibility anymore. Section 2. The contact trap. You're going to reach out. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but you will. Because there's a narrative in your head that says, if you could just say the right thing, if you could just explain yourself properly, if you could just make them understand how much they meant to you, they might reconsider. This is where you lose yourself completely. There are 1,000 reasons your mind is generating for why you should contact them. You saw something that made you think of them. You had a dream about them. You heard a song. You want to explain something you didn't explain properly during the breakup. You want to apologize. You want to make sure they're okay. You want to see if there's any possibility of reconciliation. You want to send them something meaningful. You want to check if they've forgotten about you. All of these reasons sound rational when you're thinking them, and most of them are partially true, but the fundamental truth underneath all of them is this. You are trying to control an uncontrollable person and an uncontrollable situation by using communication as a weapon. Thomas Shelby didn't beg. He didn't explain himself repeatedly to people who already made their decision. He understood something that you're about to learn the hard way. Someone who has decided to leave you does not need another message. They need silence. They need to experience the consequence of their decision, which is your absence. And you need to experience the consequence of your attachment, which is learning to live without them. When you reach out, you're not doing it for them. Stop lying to yourself. You're doing it for you. You're doing it because the silence is unbearable. You're doing it because you need them to respond, to prove that you still matter. You're doing it because you want to see your words on their screen and imagine them reading it with care. You're doing it because part of you still believes that if you could just trigger the right emotion, they might come back. And they won't come back. Not because you're not enough, but because they've decided. And every time you reach out, you're reinforcing their decision. You're proving that you can't respect their choice. You're proving that you're so attached to them that you can't function alone. You're proving that they made the right decision to leave. This is the hardest pill to swallow in post-breakup recovery. The person who left you does not need to validate your pain. They do not need to explain themselves again. They do not need to soften the blow. And you contacting them repeatedly is not giving them a chance to reconsider. It's giving them reasons to block your number. There's a specific moment where reaching out goes from understandable in grief to pathetic and obsessive. And you passed that moment 3 contacts ago. Every message you send now is you begging, and no one returns to someone who begs. They leave them. Thomas Shelby's power came from his indifference. When someone didn't serve his purposes, he didn't chase them. He moved on. He found someone else. He built something bigger. He didn't sit around waiting for them to realize what they'd lost. He made sure they realized it by becoming someone they could no longer access. Here's what happens in your head. You tell yourself that you're contacting them one last time, that this message is the final one, that you're going to say everything you need to say and then find peace. And it's a lie. There is no final message. There is no magical combination of words that will make them understand, or make them come back, or make this hurt less. Every time you've said it's the last time, you've lied. Because reaching out doesn't close chapters. It keeps them open and bleeding. The contact trap is insidious because it disguises desperation as care. You tell yourself you're checking on them. You're making sure they're okay. You're being mature by staying friendly. But if you're truly their friend, their best interests are served by you disappearing, by removing yourself from their emotional landscape, by forcing them to miss you instead of always being available when they need an ego boost or want to feel like someone still cares. And that's the other part of this. They probably will reach out eventually. They probably will come back when they're lonely or drunk or bored. And if you spend weeks calling and texting and trying to convince them, they won't see you as someone who's healing. They'll see you as someone they can access whenever they want. And they'll use that access. So you're going to delete their number. Not symbolically. Actually, you're going to remove the quick access. Because if you're thinking of contacting them, you should have to work for it. You should have to really decide that this is worth your dignity. And if you do that work, I think you'll find that the urge passes. Section 3. The narrative you're telling. In the quiet moments, You're rewriting history. You're going back through your relationship and reinterpreting every moment. Every argument is now proof that you didn't love them enough. Every disagreement is proof that you were selfish. Every time they got upset is proof that you failed them. This is the story your suffering brain is telling you, and it's a lie. But you're believing it because the lie is more comforting than the truth. The truth is that sometimes two people who care about each other genuinely don't work. The truth is that you could have been perfect, and they would have still left. The truth is that sometimes there's no villain in the story, just incompatibility, and that's harder to accept than believing you're somehow to blame. Because if you're to blame, then you can change. If you're to blame, then you have control. If you're to blame, then the next relationship might work if you just try harder, love more completely, sacrifice more of yourself. And that's the narrative that keeps you in this loop forever. Thomas Shelby didn't sit around replaying conversations and wondering what he could have done differently. He made decisions. Some were good, some had consequences, but he didn't torture himself with alternative narratives. He accepted that the past was fixed and that all his power was in the future. You're currently living in a story where you're responsible for the breakup, and maybe you contributed to it. Most people do. But you're taking full responsibility in a way that's destroying you. You're taking responsibility for their choices, for their unhappiness, for their decision to leave, and that's not yours to carry. Here's something harder to accept. Maybe you weren't a perfect partner. Maybe you had flaws. Maybe there are things you could have done better. And none of that matters right now. Because right now, the story you're telling yourself is not about growth. It's about punishment. You're mentally torturing yourself as a form of penance, and you're calling it self-reflection. Real self-reflection happens later. It happens when you're not in active grief. It happens when you can look at your patterns without the acute pain of loss making everything look worse than it is. Right now, you're not thinking clearly about your role in the breakup. You're catastrophizing. You're remembering every mistake in perfect clarity while forgetting every good moment. You're editing the story to make yourself the villain. And the problem with that narrative is that it makes you feel helpless. If you're the villain, if you're fundamentally flawed, if you're the one who ruined a good thing, then what chance do you have with anyone else? You'll just ruin them too. This is where the shame takes over. And shame is more paralyzing than sadness. Sadness eventually passes, but shame keeps you isolated. Shame keeps you checking their Instagram to see if they're happy without you, which will prove that you were the problem. Shame keeps you crafting apology messages that you'll never send, because no apology can undo the damage you've convinced yourself you've done. But here's the objective fact. You're not a bad person. You're someone who was in a relationship that ended, and that happens to literally everyone. It doesn't make you fundamentally broken. It doesn't make you undateable. It doesn't mean you'll never have healthy love again. It means you had a relationship and it ended. That's all. The narrative you're telling is a story about shame masquerading as accountability, and you need to stop telling it. Not because you shouldn't learn from the relationship, but because you can't learn anything useful while you're in the acute phase of grief. You can only beat yourself up. You can only spiral. You can only reinforce the shame. Thomas Shelby understood narratives. He understood that the story you tell yourself about who you are becomes your reality. He didn't tell himself stories about his limitations. He told himself stories about his power, and he acted from that place. So, you're going to stop rewriting history. You're going to accept that you did your best with the understanding you had at the time. You're going to accept that they made their choice based on their needs. You're going to stop turning yourself into the villain of a story that doesn't need one. And you're going to start a new narrative, the one where you survive this and come out the other side stronger. Section 4, the replacement escape. Some of you are already doing this. You're on dating apps. You're talking to 3 new people. You're planning dates. You're telling yourself that the best way to get over someone is to get under someone else. And you're wrong. This is not healing. This is not moving on. This is running. And you're running so fast that you can't see what you're running from. The replacement escape works temporarily. A new conversation with someone new who's interested in you gives you a dopamine hit. They're not them. They're fresh. They're interested. They think you're great. And for a moment, the pain subsides. But it doesn't disappear. It just hides. And what happens next is that you project all your needs onto this new person. You need them to be different from your ex. You need them to prove that you're worthy of love. You need them to not leave you. And you're putting all of that pressure on someone who just wanted to have coffee, not heal your entire psyche. Thomas Shelby didn't make emotional decisions based on his pain. He didn't enter into partnerships when he was vulnerable. He got himself to a place of strength first, and then he made strategic moves. He didn't use people to avoid his own feelings, and neither should you. The replacement escape is particularly dangerous because it looks like you're moving on. You can tell people you're dating again. You can look busy. You can feel wanted, but you're not healing. You're delaying. And when this new person inevitably doesn't work out because you're comparing them to your ex or expecting them to fill the void, you'll spiral even harder. Here's what you need to do instead. Sit with the discomfort. Sit with the loneliness. Sit with the grief. It's uncomfortable and it sucks and you're going to want to escape it. But that's where the actual healing happens. Not in the distraction, not in the new relationship, but in the space where you face the fact that you're alone and discover that you can survive it. Section 5. The blame shift. You're starting to rewrite the narrative again, but this time in the opposite direction. Now they're the villain. Now they're selfish and cold and incapable of love. Now they're the problem. They were the one who couldn't commit. They were the one who didn't try. They were the one who threw away something good. And maybe some of that's true, but you're not doing this because it's accurate. You're doing this because accurate feels better than sadness. Anger makes you feel powerful. Sadness makes you feel weak. This is the trap that keeps people stuck in breakups for years. You get angry enough to stop loving them. You get angry enough to justify hating them. You get angry enough to convince yourself that you dodged a bullet. And then you spend the next 5 years occasionally checking their social media to see what they're doing, still angry, still resentful, still not actually moved on. Thomas Shelby didn't hate people who crossed him. He didn't need to. He simply removed them from his life and built something bigger. He didn't invest emotional energy in resentment. He invested it in moving forward. And the power came from the forward movement, not from the anger. You need to stop making them the villain. They're just a person who wanted different things than you, or they had issues they couldn't resolve, or they fell out of love, or they weren't ready for what you needed. None of these things make them evil, and making them evil doesn't make you a victim worth saving. It just makes you bitter. Section 6. What you do instead. Now that you understand what not to do, here's what you actually do. This is where you build something. This is where you get your power back. First, you accept the breakup as final, not eventually. Not when you're ready. Now, you write yourself a letter where you acknowledge that this person has made a decision and you respect that decision. You acknowledge that you're in pain and that the pain will last longer than you want it to. You acknowledge that you will survive it anyway, and then you close that chapter mentally, not because you've forgotten them, but because you've accepted that they're gone. Second, you remove access. You unfollow them on everything. You delete their number. You tell your friends not to tell you about them. You create a hard boundary between your life and theirs. This isn't about being mean. It's about being clear. You're no longer in each other's lives, and you both deserve the space to move on. Third, you sit with your pain, not distracted, not medicated, not numbed. You actually sit with it. You cry, you scream, you write it down, you feel it, and you let it move through you instead of getting stuck in you. This takes days or weeks or months depending on the relationship, but this is the work. This is the only thing that actually heals. Fourth, you invest in yourself, not as a way to attract someone new or prove your ex wrong, but because you're worth investing in. You exercise not to look good, but because moving your body processes grief. You read not to distract yourself, but because reading teaches you about the world and yourself. You spend time with friends, not because you can't be alone, but because connection is part of being alive. You build yourself into a more interesting, more complete person. Fifth, you examine your patterns. When you're no longer in crisis mode, you look at why you're in that relationship. What were you seeking? What needs were you trying to fill? What patterns do you repeat? What are you learning about yourself? This is real growth. Not the shame-based self-flagellation you were doing before, but actual curious examination of who you are and how you show up in relationships. Sixth, you practice indifference, not toward yourself, but toward them. You practice not caring whether they're happy or sad, or dating someone new or alone. You practice knowing that their life is no longer your business. You practice the kind of detachment that Thomas Shelby had toward people who are no longer useful to his story. You're not cold, you're clear, there's a difference. And finally, you wait. You wait until you can think about them without your chest tightening. You wait until their name doesn't trigger an emotional response. You wait until enough time has passed that you can see the relationship with perspective. You wait until you're genuinely okay. And only then do you decide if you want to be friendly, cordial, or completely separate. But you wait until you're the one making that decision from a place of strength, not from a place of desperation. This is the actual work, not the checking, not the contacting, not the replacement relationships, not the anger and blame, but the slow, difficult work of accepting that something is over and you're going to survive it anyway. Section 7, the long view. You're going to get through this. You don't believe it right now because you're in the acute phase of grief, but you're going to get through it. In 6 months, you're going to wake up and realize you didn't check their Instagram, and you didn't do it deliberately. You just didn't think about it. And that moment will hit you harder than the breakup itself, because you'll realize you've actually moved on. In a year, you're going to run into them somewhere or see them on social media and feel almost nothing. Maybe a little nostalgia, maybe a little tenderness for who you were together, but the acute pain will be gone. The obsession will be gone. The narrative that this was the most important thing that ever happened to you will be gone. In 2 years, you're going to understand why the relationship ended. Not as blame, not as victim and perpetrator, but as two people who wanted different things. And you're going to be grateful for what you learned about yourself through that relationship. And you're going to be grateful that it ended so you could become the person you're becoming. And in 5 years, if you do this work, you're going to look at your life and not recognize it from this moment right now. You're going to have built something. You're going to be someone different. You're going to have experiences and relationships and understandings that only came possible because this one ended. But that future only exists if you stop the behaviors that are trapping you in the past. Thomas Shelby understood something that most people learn too late. Nostalgia is a disease. It's the tendency to look backward and create a mythologized version of the past that never actually existed. Your relationship was never as perfect as you're remembering it right now. And your ex was never as necessary to your survival as you're telling yourself. This is hard to hear when you're in it, but years from now you'll get it. You'll understand that the person who was willing to leave you was not the person you need. You'll understand that the pain you're in right now, as unbearable as it feels, is actually making you stronger. You'll understand that sometimes the best thing that can happen to you is someone leaving, but you only get to that understanding if you stop the self-sabotaging behaviors right now. So here's your action plan. Unfollow them today. Delete their number. Stop constructing narratives about what you could have done differently. Stop reaching out. Stop replacing them. Stop checking. Stop obsessing. Accept that they're gone and that you're going to survive their absence. Sit with the discomfort. Build yourself. Invest in growth that has nothing to do with making them jealous or proving them wrong. Wait until the acute pain passes and then look at your life and understand that everything that's grown in this person came because something else had to die. That's not tragedy. That's evolution.